I provide support for researchers around reuse of materials, especially things like reproduction and adaptation. I also look after licensing, so if you have any questions around open licensing, reach out. In addition, I also provide some support around some areas of IP, such as moral rights. In addition to that, I also provide support for courses and teaching, and also tie up all the licensing for the campuses, so with the various copyright agencies, for example, so we can have music played on campus. Copyright varies by country. It's one of those things that there are a number of similarities, usually based on things like the international treaties that we have, like the Berne Convention, but there are a number of differences too, so it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Just to give you an example, in the US, they have what's called fair use. So fair use is usually allowed in a number of areas as long as the work is considered transformative. But there's no real way to know if it's really allowed under fair use without some kind of litigation and going through a court process. Here in Australia, we have what's called fair dealing. It's much different, much more restricted, and I find that kind of easier clarification is better for understanding, because people kind of know what goalposts they need to work within. So questions around ownership of copyright are one of the things I get a lot. If we check out the university's IP policy, you'll see that any scholarly works that you write, you actually keep the copyright in yourself. The university doesn't claim them. There is one thing to keep in mind though. When you are publishing in a journal or some other of those kind of avenues, quite often you're signing over the copyright to the publisher as part of the publishing agreement. And that can really limit what you are able to do with your own work afterwards. So keep those kind of things in mind. There are a number of factors that can actually affect where you can post your article or paper. It basically comes down to which publisher you're going with, what agreement they're making you sign, what version of the actual paper or article you want to make available, and also it can even come down to things like what site you want to put it into. So I recommend that anyone that's interested in making their publications open access, start with Nova. That's our online repository here at the university. We actually have a team that can do copyright clearance for you, so that way you don't need to think about a lot of that stuff. You can basically just send them what you want to make available and they'll take care of it all for you. Open licensing is great where you want to make your work available for others to use. There are some things to consider though, and you really should take time to think about what permissions do I want to embed in my work to make it available and obvious to others what they can then do with it. So there are other considerations as well that you might need to think about. So you may have a funding requirement, and they might specify a particular license you need to use. There could be things too, like your school or college might have a preferred style of license, or even the site that you're posting it to may have restrictions about what license options they give you. So those are all things that you need to kind of look at and think about. If everything else is kind of taken off the board and someone just wants to know what license I would suggest you put on your work, I would go with a Creative Commons license, more specifically the CC BY-NC license. So what this does is it keeps it open for everybody to share, to reuse, and to adapt into different things, but it kind of restricts those commercial uses. So nobody can take your work, make money from it, unless they talk to you first. Third-party materials are works that are owned by others. Now, for students, they have an exception in copyright legislation here that allows them to reproduce materials in their assessment, and they don't have to think about this stuff. But for anyone writing a digital thesis or a publication, that's something that you will need to consider. It's not covered under the research or study option that's in the Copyright Act. And you do need to get permission from the copyright owner to be able to reproduce material in either a publication or a thesis. So sometimes it's quite easy and you can just go online, you fill out an online form and you get that permission straight away. Other times there's no way of doing that and you need to kind of go the more traditional route where you email the copyright owner and then get that permission in writing. Copyright and licensing can be confusing. So if you need help, please seek it out. You can reach out to your school or college's research liaison librarian, or you can contact the copyright advisor directly.